The escape pod tore through the atmosphere of Helios 9, trailing flames and debris from the battle that had raged in orbit just hours before. Inside, Commander Kira Vex of the Thraxi Dominion clutched at the wound in her side, violet blood seeping between the cracked plates of her exormer. Warning lights flashed across her helmet display as life support systems failed one by one. Terminal damage detected. Atmospheric breach imminent, the AI intoned with maddening calm. Override protocols. Divert all power to landing thrusters, Kira hissed through clenched teeth. The Consortium forces had ambushed her scout ship, and though she'd taken 3 of their vessels down, her own had been torn apart. This mining colony was her only chance of survival. The pod slammed into the rocky terrain with enough force to knock her unconscious. When awareness returned, her visor was cracked, and smoke filled the cabin. Kira dragged herself from the wreckage, scanning the barren landscape. In the distance, the lights of a settlement glimmered against the approaching dusk. Elijah Drake wiped sweat from his brow as he finished the modifications on Old Man Hendrix's harvester. For years on this backwater colony had taught him to repurpose just about anything with moving parts. It wasn't the life he'd imagined when he'd left Earth, but after what happened at the Ganymede station, it was the quiet existence he deserved. The proximity alarm startled him from his thoughts. Something had breached the colony's perimeter, something large. Grabbing his toolkit and emergency med kit, Elijah hopped onto his hoverbike, following the coordinates on his wrist display. The crash site was still smoldering when he arrived. The design of the pod wasn't human, sleek, angular, with markings he'd never seen before. And then he saw her, a figure in damaged armor, collapsed 100 yards from the wreckage. "Hey! Are you alright?" Elijah called, approaching cautiously. When the figure didn't respond, he knelt beside it, studying the unfamiliar armor. Definitely not human manufacture. With practiced hands, he released the helmet clasps and carefully removed it. His breath caught in his throat. The face that emerged had humanoid features but with iridescent purple skin, angular cheekbones, and delicate gill-like structures along her neck. Her eyes snapped open, entirely black with flecks of silver like distant stars. In one fluid motion, she grabbed his wrist and flipped him onto his back, a blade suddenly at his throat. "Whoa! Easy. I'm trying to help," Elijah shouted, staying perfectly still. She spoke in a language his translator couldn't decipher, her voice melodic but harsh with pain. The blade wavered as she winced, more violet blood seeping from her side. "You're injured," Elijah said slowly, pointing to her wound. "I can help." "Mechanic." He tapped his toolkit. "Fix." Understanding flickered in those starlit eyes. After a tense moment, she lowered the blade and slumped back, clearly fighting to remain conscious. "I'm Elijah," he said, tapping his chest before cautiously helping her onto his hoverbike. "Kira," she replied, her translator finally syncing with his language. "Commander Kira Vex." As they sped toward the colony, Elijah felt an uneasy sensation in his chest. The Thraxi Dominion was known for their warrior culture and isolationist policies. Having one of their commanders here could only mean trouble. Yet looking at her damaged armor, technology more advanced than anything he'd seen, the mechanic in him couldn't help but be intrigued. What he didn't know was that saving her would change everything, not just for him and this forgotten colony, but for the war that raged across the stars. The small medical bay of the mining colony wasn't equipped for alien physiology, but Elijah had convinced Dr. Nadia Okafor to treat Kira's wounds. Now, 3 days later, the Thraxi commander sat stiffly on a stool in Elijah's workshop, watching him examine her armor with barely concealed suspicion. "The Xenosteel plating is compromised beyond standard repair," Elijah muttered, more to himself than to her as he placed a piece under his scanner. "But if I recalibrate the molecular bonds?" "Our armor is sacred," Kira interrupted, her translator converting her musical language into clipped standard. No outsider has ever touched Thraxi battletech. Elijah glanced up, noting how her posture remained rigid despite her injuries. The silver flecks in her eyes seemed to pulse with intensity. Well, unless you've got a backup suit hidden somewhere, this sacred armor isn't going to keep you alive in your next fight. He tapped the shattered chest plate. The life support systems are completely fried. A muscle twitched in Kira's jaw. Then I will die with honor. Or, Elijah countered, setting down his tools, you could let me help you, and maybe find a way home. Their standoff was interrupted by a small child barreling into the workshop, followed by an exasperated woman. Elijah. I'm so sorry, Mika wanted to see the Star Lady again. The little girl, no more than 6, stared wide-eyed at Kira. Your skin is pretty, she announced. Like the aurora. Something shifted in Kira's expression, a softening almost imperceptible. You have seen the soul lights in your sky? She asked the child. Mika nodded enthusiastically. Elijah takes me to watch them when they come. He knows all about stars and ships and stuff. Elijah smiled apologetically at Kira, expecting her to dismiss the child. Instead, he watched in surprise as she leaned forward, wincing slightly. On my world, we believe the aurora contains the spirits of our ancestors, Kira told Mika. They guide warriors home. Are you lost? Mika asked innocently. The question hung in the air as Kira's gaze drifted to the broken pieces of her armor, her connection to her people, her duty, her identity. Perhaps, she finally answered. After the visitors left, Kira watched Elijah return to his work, his hands moving with surprising precision for a human. The colony had surprised her. She'd expected primitive conditions, but instead found an adaptable community that had created something functional from limited resources. Why are you here, human? She asked suddenly. Your skills would be valued in your core worlds. Elijah's hands paused momentarily. Sometimes being valued isn't enough, he said quietly. Sometimes you need forgiveness. That night, as Kira lay on the cot in Elijah's spare room, she found herself listening to him working late into the night. The soft clinks and hums of his tools created an unfamiliar rhythm. Among her people, repair was considered menial, beneath a warrior's dignity. Yet she'd seen the respect others showed this mechanic. When morning came, Kira made her decision. She placed her damaged helmet in Elijah's hands. If I am to survive here, I require functioning armor, she stated formally. Will you assist me, Elijah Drake? His smile, something she was beginning to recognize as genuine rather than tactical, caught her off guard. I thought you'd never ask, Commander. What neither of them realized was that each piece of armor Elijah repaired would slowly dismantle the barriers Kira had built around herself through years of war and discipline. And as days turned into weeks, the reluctant guest began to see the colony not as exile, but as sanctuary, and her human host not as an alien curiosity, but as something far more dangerous to a Thraxi warrior, a possibility. The marketplace of Helios 9 buzzed with the afternoon trading rush when Elijah noticed the stranger. Tall, humanoid, with a telltale scanner sweeping methodically across the crowd. Bounty hunter. His heart rate quickened as he casually redirected Kira, who walked beside him carrying supplies for her armor repairs. We need to move, he whispered, guiding her down a side alley. What is it? Kira asked, instantly alert, her posture shifting to combat-ready despite wearing civilian clothes over her partially repaired armor. Someone scanning for non-human biosignatures. Professional gear, military grade. Kira's eyes narrowed. Consortium. They track any Thraxi who escape battle. They reached Elijah's workshop just as the colony's emergency siren began to wail. From the window, they watched a sleek ship descend near the administration building. Not the usual supply vessel. Your escape pod's energy signature must have been logged, Elijah said, hastily gathering tools and supplies. "They've been tracking you." "I must face them," Kira stated, reaching for her pulse blade. "This is my battle." Elijah grabbed her wrist. "This is a civilian colony. If you engage here, innocent people get caught in the crossfire." Something changed in her expression, concern for others beyond tactical assessment. It was new. "There's an abandoned mining facility in the northern ridge," he continued. "Underground, shielded. We can hide there while I finish your armor repairs." 30 minutes later, they were speeding across the barren landscape on Elijah's modified hoverbike, the wind whipping around them as two pursuit crafts appeared on the horizon. "Hold tight," Elijah shouted, veering sharply into a narrow canyon. Kira's arms tightened around his waist as they weaved through rock formations at dangerous speeds. The maneuver bought them enough time to reach the abandoned facility and seal the heavy doors behind them. In the dim emergency lighting, they made their way deeper into the complex. The silence between them was charged with unspoken questions. "Why are you risking yourself for me?" Kira finally asked as they settled in a former control room. "I have brought danger to your home." Elijah unpacked his tools, not meeting her gaze. "Wouldn't be the first time I've been in trouble." "You speak of Ganymede," she observed. "The others mentioned it. What happened there?" His hands stilled. No one at the colony ever asked directly. They respected the silence of those with pasts. "I was chief engineer on a research station," he said quietly. "There was an accident. Pressure seals failed in a section I'd certified as safe. 14 people didn't make it out." "You blame yourself for deaths in battle?" Kira asked, genuine confusion in her voice. "It wasn't battle. They were scientists, families." His voice cracked slightly. "I check and double-check everything now." Kira was silent for a long moment. Then she removed the outer layer of her clothing, revealing her partial armor. In the dim light, Elijah could see intricate markings etched into the plates, symbols he hadn't noticed before. "Each mark represents a significant victory," she explained, seeing his interest. "Or a significant loss." She pointed to a series of deeper grooves. "My squadron. Ambushed under my command. I alone survived." Their eyes met in the shadows, recognition passing between them, the weight of those who live when others don't. "Among my people," Kira said softly, "survival carries the obligation to honor those lost by continuing to fight." Her hand hovered near his for a moment before withdrawing. "Perhaps humans and Thraxi are not so different in this." That night, as Elijah worked by lamplight on the final components of her armor, Kira watched his hands, steady, focused, precise. The same hands that had pulled her from the wreckage without hesitation. Hands that created rather than destroyed. "Tomorrow they will find us," she said matter-of-factly. Elijah nodded without looking up. "Probably. And you still work to repair my armor? Knowing it will lead to battle?" He finally met her gaze, something unreadable in his expression. "I'm repairing it so you have a choice. Fight, run, whatever you decide. But it'll be your decision, not one forced on you by broken equipment." Choice. The concept seemed foreign to Kira, whose life had been directed by duty and honor since childhood. Yet in this moment, hidden away with an alien whose kindness defied all Thraxi teachings about humans, she felt something new taking root, something dangerous, something hopeful. Dawn broke over the northern ridge in streaks of amber and violet. Kira stood at the facility's observation window, fully armored for the first time since her crash. Elijah had worked through the night, and the results exceeded her expectations. Her exosuit hummed with restored power, each plate aligned perfectly, the neural interface sharper than before. "How does it feel?" Elijah asked, exhaustion evident in his voice as he approached. Kira executed a rapid sequence of combat moves, testing the armor's responsiveness. You have improved it, she said, unable to keep the surprise from her voice. The joint articulation is more fluid. He shrugged. I made some modifications to the hydraulic system. Figured a warrior should be able to move like one. A proximity alert from her helmet interrupted them. They are here, she announced, her voice shifting to the detached tone of a commander. 3 hunters, heavily armed. Elijah checked his makeshift scanner. They've surrounded the facility. Main entrance, east service tunnel, and roof access. He looked at her, concern evident. Even with the armor, those are bad odds. I have faced worse, Kira replied, though without her usual conviction. Something had changed during her time with the humans, with him. The prospect of battle no longer brought the clarity it once had. Let me show you something first, Elijah said unexpectedly, leading her to a small room they hadn't explored. Inside stood an old mining mech, bulky and outdated, but operational. You know how to pilot this? Kira asked, surprised. It's not so different from the heavy repair units on Ganymede. His fingers moved deftly over the control panel, bringing the machine to life. Not exactly combat-ready, but it might even the odds. For the first time since he'd known her, Kira laughed, a sound like chimes in wind. A mechanic who wishes to be a warrior? More like a guy who doesn't want to see you fighting alone, he countered, climbing into the pilot's seat. Her expression sobered. My people have a saying, blood spilled in battle binds deeper than birth. She placed a hand on the mech's arm. If we fight together, Elijah Drake, we become something in Thraxi culture that cannot be undone. And what's that? He asked, something catching in his throat. Shurkari. Battle bonded. Her eyes held his, the silver flecks swirling like distant galaxies. It is significant. The moment stretched between them, electric with unspoken meaning. Then the facility shuddered as the first explosive charge breached the main entrance. Teach me after, Elijah said, securing the mech's safety harness. Assuming we survive. The battle that followed was chaotic and fierce. The bounty hunters, expecting to find a single injured Thraxi, were unprepared for the coordinated attack. Kira moved with lethal precision, her armor responding perfectly to each command, while Elijah used the mining mech's powerful arms to create barriers and distractions. When it was over, 2 hunters lay unconscious, and the third had retreated to their ship. Kira stood amid the aftermath, violet blood streaming from a gash in her arm where a blade had found a seam in her armor. Elijah emerged from the damaged mech, a cut above his eye but otherwise intact. Without thinking, he approached her and pressed his hand to her wound. You're hurt, he said simply. It is nothing, she replied, but didn't pull away from his touch. In human culture, he said quietly, caring for someone's wounds is also significant. Their eyes met, and something shifted in the air between them, the invisible barrier of species and culture suddenly paper-thin. Kira reached up, her armored fingers surprisingly gentle as they brushed the blood from his forehead. Show me, she whispered, her translator barely catching the words. In the aftermath of battle, surrounded by destruction, Elijah slowly helped remove her helmet. Her face, framed by tendrils that resembled hair but shimmered like fiber optics, was no longer alien to him, it was simply Kira. When he kissed her, the taste was unfamiliar, something like ozone and sweetness, but the response was unmistakable. Her arms encircled him, armor plates warming against his skin as the distance between warrior and mechanic, between alien and human, dissolved into something neither of them had words for yet. That night, as they prepared to return to the colony, Kira looked at the stars, the same stars that had once guided her military campaigns, now witnesses to a different kind of conquest. What happens now? Elijah asked, standing beside her. Kira's hand found his in the darkness. Now we discover what it means to be Shurkari in times of peace, she said. If such a thing is possible. The mining colony of Helios 9 had seen its share of strange sights, but none quite like the ceremony taking place in the community hall. Thraxi meditation candles cast a purple glow over the gathered colonists as Kira stood before them in her full ceremonial armor, its plates now intricately engraved with new markings, Elijah's work. The Consortium hunters have been banished from this system, she announced formally. Your colony will be safe. 3 months had passed since the battle at the mining facility. 3 months of rebuilding, of explanations to colony leadership, of quiet nights when Kira taught Elijah her language and he showed her Earth customs that made her silver-flecked eyes widen with surprise or amusement. 3 months of learning each other's bodies, the differences that created challenges and the similarities that created wonder. Nights when Kira's iridescent skin glowed with bioluminescence in moments of passion, illuminating Elijah's small quarters like the aurora she described to Mika. But now reality intruded. A Thraxi scout vessel had responded to the distress signal Kira had activated using her repaired armor. It would arrive within days. This means you're leaving, little Mika said after the ceremony, looking up at Kira with solemn eyes. Kira knelt to the child's level, a gesture that would have been unthinkable for a Thraxi commander before her time among humans. I must report what I have learned of the Consortium's movements. It could save many lives. Elijah stood apart from the gathering, watching as Kira interacted with the colonists who had gone from fearing her to accepting her presence. His hands were restless, already missing the work of exploring her technology, of bridging the gap between their worlds through the language of machinery. Later, in the privacy of what had become their shared home, the question that had hovered between them for weeks finally emerged. Come with me, Kira said as she removed her armor, each piece revealing more of the person beneath the warrior. The Thraxi Dominion needs humans like you. Your understanding of technology, your perspective. Elijah sat heavily on the edge of their bed. I couldn't. I'm not a warrior, Kira. I fix things. I don't destroy them. That is precisely why you would be valuable, she insisted, sitting beside him. The war has continued for generations because neither side sees beyond destruction. And what would I be there? An alien curiosity? Your human pet? The words came out harsher than intended. Kira's expression hardened, then softened again, that balance of strength and vulnerability she discovered during her time with him. You would be sure carry to a Thraxi commander. It has never happened before, but our laws are clear. The battle bond transcends all other considerations. And if I asked you to stay? Elijah countered. To build something here instead of returning to war? The silence that followed was heavy with impossible choices. Kira's duty to her people warred with her growing attachment to this human and his way of life. Elijah's newfound purpose repairing her armor conflicted with his reluctance to enter a world of continuing conflict. Perhaps, Kira finally said, there is a third path. The day the Thraxi vessel arrived, the entire colony gathered to witness what many believed would be a farewell. The ship's design was elegant and lethal, hovering above the settlement with an air of barely restrained power. Kira stood at the landing site in full armor, Elijah beside her. When the ship's commander emerged, a towering Thraxi with battle scars visible even through his armor, Kira stepped forward and addressed him in their language, gesturing occasionally to Elijah and the colony. The conversation grew heated, then subdued. Finally, the commander nodded curtly and returned to his vessel. What happened? Elijah asked as Kira returned to his side. I have proposed an alliance, she explained. This colony sits at a strategic location, one the Consortium has already demonstrated interest in. I have volunteered to establish a Thraxi outpost here, a first attempt at coexistence rather than conquest. And they agreed? Elijah asked incredulously. My status as battle hero grants me certain privileges, she said with the hint of a smile. And my detailed reports of human ingenuity, particularly regarding your repairs to technology they considered irreparable, have piqued their interest. Elijah looked from the departing ship to the woman beside him, still struggling to comprehend the implications. "So you're staying?" "I am staying," Kira confirmed. "Though others will come. There will be challenges, misunderstandings. Two worlds colliding is never without friction. Good thing they'll have an expert in repairs, then," Elijah said, his hand finding hers, human fingers interlacing with alien ones in a grip that had become as natural as breathing. That night, as they lay together beneath a sky painted with aurora lights, Kira traced the outline of Elijah's face as if memorizing it anew. "Among my people," she said softly, "there is a belief that souls who find each other across the void of stars were once born of the same cosmic dust." "Romantic for a warrior culture," Elijah teased, but his voice was tender. "Perhaps that is what we are truly repairing," Kira mused, her bioluminescence casting gentle patterns across their entwined forms. "Not just armor or machines, but the ancient fragments of ourselves, scattered across different worlds, different forms, yet somehow finding their way back together." Elijah pulled her closer, this woman from beyond the stars who had crashed into his life and changed everything. "Then we'd better keep working," he whispered against her skin. "We've got a lot more fixing to do." Above them, the aurora shifted and danced, bearing witness to something unprecedented, a bond forged between worlds that had never anticipated peace, discovered in the most unlikely of places by a warrior who learned to heal and a mechanic who found the courage to fight. And it had all begun with a broken piece of armor and hands skilled enough to repair what others thought beyond saving.